Across the vast dry belt of the Sahel, a new security question is quietly emerging. For years, the region has struggled with violent armed groups that move easily across borders, attacking villages, military bases, and even major cities. But now another layer of tension is beginning to shape the future of West Africa. The Economic Community of West African States, known as ECOWAS, has announced plans to deploy a regional standby military force to respond to growing insecurity. At the same time, three Sahelian nations, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, have formed their own alliance known as the Alliance of Sahel States. They are building a joint military force and reshaping their regional partnerships. This situation raises an important question that many observers across Africa are now asking. Is the ECOWAS standby force purely designed to fight terrorism that threatens the region, or could it also become a tool of political pressure against the new AES alliance? To understand this question, we must first look at the deeper crisis unfolding across the Sahel. Violent extremist groups linked to global jihadist networks have turned large parts of this region into one of the most dangerous conflict zones in the world. These groups move through deserts, forests, and poorly controlled border regions. They attack military positions, disrupt trade routes, and terrorize rural communities that already struggle with poverty and limited government presence. The rise of these groups has forced governments across West Africa to rethink how they defend their territories. But as new alliances form and old ones weaken, the fight against terrorism is now taking place alongside a broader struggle over leadership, sovereignty, and the future security order of Africa. Across the Sahel, the violence carried out by armed extremist groups has reached levels that many security experts now describe as unprecedented. This vast region, stretching from Mauritania to Sudan, has become the epicenter of terrorism in Africa. For governments across West Africa, the challenge is no longer simply protecting isolated villages. It is about defending entire national borders and preventing instability from spreading south toward the coastal states. Several powerful armed organizations operate across this region. One of the most influential is Jama'at Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, often referred to as JNIM. This group is linked to Al-Qaeda and operates across Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and parts of Benin. Another dangerous faction is the Islamic State Sahel province, which has carried out brutal attacks on military bases and civilian settlements. Alongside them are Boko Haram and its splinter group, Islamic State West Africa Province, which remain active across northeastern Nigeria and neighboring areas. These groups exploit geography to their advantage. The Sahel contains vast deserts, forests, and poorly monitored borders that allow fighters to move quickly between countries. A group that attacks a military post in one country can retreat across a border within hours. This makes it extremely difficult for any single national army to defeat them alone. In some areas, extremist groups have even begun to act like alternative authorities. They collect taxes from local populations, regulate trade routes, and promise protection to communities that cooperate with them. In regions where governments struggle to provide services or security, these groups sometimes fill the vacuum. As a result, the security crisis in the Sahel has become a regional emergency. It is no longer confined to the interior of Mali or Burkina Faso. Armed groups are increasingly pushing south toward countries like Benin and Togo. If this trend continues, the instability that began in the Sahel could eventually threaten the entire West African region. The plan to activate the ECOWAS standby force is not entirely new. For decades, ECOWAS has maintained the idea of a regional military force that can respond quickly when a member state faces a major crisis. The force traces its roots back to the early 1990s, when West African nations created a coalition known as the ECOWAS Monitoring Group to intervene in civil wars that threatened regional stability. During the long conflicts in Liberia and Sierra Leone, this regional force played a decisive role. Thousands of troops from countries such as Nigeria and Ghana were deployed to help restore order and push back rebel factions. Unlike many international peacekeeping missions that only monitor ceasefires, ECOWAS forces were often involved in direct combat operations. Over time, this experience shaped the idea of a permanent standby force capable of responding to new security threats. The ECOWAS standby force was later formalized as part of a broader African security architecture that included similar regional forces in East and Southern Africa. Today, the organization believes the region faces a different kind of danger. Instead of civil wars driven by political factions, West Africa is confronting highly mobile extremist groups that operate across several countries at once. These groups do not aim to control a single capital city. Instead, they spread influence gradually through rural territories, border corridors, and trade routes. Because of this shift, ECOWAS leaders argue that national armies acting alone cannot solve the crisis. Armed groups simply retreat across borders whenever pressure increases. A coordinated regional response is therefore seen as essential. Under the latest proposal, ECOWAS plans to mobilize an initial force of roughly 2,000 troops. Their mission would be to respond rapidly to terrorist threats, support national armies, and help prevent extremist groups from expanding into the coastal states of West Africa. While ECOWAS is preparing its regional force, another security structure has been taking shape at the heart of the Sahel. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have formed a new alliance known as the Alliance of Sahel States, often called the AES. This partnership emerged after a series of military takeovers in the three countries and growing disagreements with ECOWAS over sanctions, political pressure, and the pace of returning to civilian rule. For the leaders of these Sahelian states, the creation of AES represents more than a diplomatic partnership. It is intended to be a collective security system designed to defend their countries against both terrorism and what they describe as external interference. The alliance includes commitments for mutual defense, meaning that if one member is attacked, the others are expected to assist. A major part of this strategy is the creation of a joint military capability. The three governments have announced plans to develop a combined force that could eventually include several thousand soldiers. The objective is to coordinate operations across the vast border regions that link the three countries. These border areas have long served as safe corridors for extremist fighters moving between Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Supporters of the alliance argue that a unified Sahelian command structure could allow for faster responses to attacks. Instead of each country fighting separately, troops could pursue armed groups across borders without the delays that often come from diplomatic coordination. The formation of AES also reflects a deeper political shift. The three governments have distanced themselves from some of their traditional Western partners and have sought new security partnerships, particularly with Russia. This shift has changed the balance of influence in the region and has introduced new dynamics into the already complex security environment of West Africa. As both ECOWAS and the Alliance of Sahel States strengthen their military structures, many analysts are beginning to warn about a new possibility. Instead of creating a united front against terrorism, West Africa could gradually see the emergence of two parallel security blocs operating in the same region. On one side stands ECOWAS, a long-established regional organization that includes many of the coastal states of West Africa. For decades, it has played a central role in diplomacy, economic integration, and security cooperation. Its standby force concept is part of a wider African security system supported by the African Union and often coordinated with international partners. On the other side is the newer Alliance of Sahel States. Although smaller in membership, AES sits at the geographic center of the Sahel conflict zone. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger together control vast territories where many extremist groups are most active. Their governments argue that they face the front line of the terrorism crisis and therefore must design their own security solutions. The challenge arises because these two security frameworks are developing at the same time, but not necessarily under the same command structure. If ECOWAS deploys troops to areas near the Sahel, while AES forces expand their own operations, both sides could find themselves conducting missions in overlapping regions. This situation does not automatically mean confrontation. In theory, both alliances share a common enemy in the extremist groups threatening the region. Cooperation in intelligence sharing, border monitoring, and joint operations could strengthen the overall fight against terrorism. However, political tensions complicate the picture. The relationship between ECOWAS and the AES governments has been strained since the coups that brought military leaders to power in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Sanctions, diplomatic disputes, and disagreements over political transitions have deepened mistrust. Because of this history, some observers worry that security initiatives might be interpreted through a political lens. Actions taken by ECOWAS could be viewed by AES leaders as attempts to reassert influence, while AES military expansion could be seen by others as a challenge to the regional order that ECOWAS has led for decades. If such perceptions grow stronger, the risk is not direct conflict between states, but fragmentation in the regional strategy against terrorism. Instead of pooling resources, intelligence, and logistics, different alliances might pursue separate approaches. For a region already facing one of the most complex security crises in the world, divided strategies could make an already difficult fight even harder. The growing tension between ECOWAS and the Alliance of Sahel States cannot be understood without looking closely at the perspectives of the leaders who now govern the Sahelian alliance. The military governments of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have built their legitimacy largely on one central promise. They claim they will restore security and defend national sovereignty after years of instability. Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso has become one of the most visible faces of this new political direction. Since taking power, he has repeatedly emphasized that the fight against terrorism must be led primarily by African nations themselves. In his speeches, he often argues that foreign military strategies used in the past did not bring lasting stability to the Sahel. Instead, he promotes a vision in which African countries cooperate more closely with each other while maintaining control over their own security decisions. Assimi Goïta, the leader of Mali, shares a similar perspective. Under his leadership, Mali has restructured its military partnerships and strengthened cooperation with the other AES members. Goïta has supported the creation of joint military operations across the borders linking Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. The goal is to allow troops to pursue armed groups more effectively across the remote regions where extremist networks operate. In Niger, General Abdurrahman Tiani has also defended the decision to leave ECOWAS and join the Sahel Alliance. He argues that the previous regional arrangements placed too much emphasis on political pressure rather than on immediate security needs. For the AES leadership, the alliance represents a new path that prioritizes defense cooperation and national sovereignty. These political positions have attracted strong reactions from Western governments and institutions. Some Western officials worry that the shift toward new security partnerships could weaken international coordination against extremist groups. Others are concerned about the growing influence of Russia in the region, following the withdrawal of several Western military missions. Critics in Europe and North America often argue that the departure of the Sahelian states from ECOWAS could fragment the regional response to terrorism. If countries begin to operate within separate alliances, intelligence sharing and coordinated military planning may become more difficult. However, supporters of the Sahel Alliance offer a different perspective. Many citizens across the region feel that years of foreign military assistance failed to bring peace to their communities. From their viewpoint, the push for greater sovereignty and regional self-reliance represents an attempt to find new solutions to a long-running crisis. For the rest of Africa, the situation unfolding in the Sahel offers several important lessons. Security challenges that cross borders require cooperation, but that cooperation must also respect national priorities and local realities. Regional organizations must balance political expectations with the urgent need to protect communities from violence. The future stability of the Sahel may ultimately depend on whether ECOWAS and the Alliance of Sahel States can find ways to cooperate rather than compete. If they succeed in building bridges between their security strategies, the region may strengthen its ability to confront extremist threats. But if mistrust continues to grow, the danger is that two parallel security systems will operate side by side while armed groups exploit the gaps between them. In a region already under immense pressure, unity could become the most powerful weapon against instability. The situation unfolding in the Sahel today reflects more than a security crisis. It also reflects a broader debate about the future of cooperation and leadership across Africa. On one side, ECOWAS believes that a coordinated regional military response is necessary to prevent extremist groups from spreading deeper into West Africa. On the other side, the Alliance of Sahel States argues that countries directly facing the threat must have greater control over how security strategies are designed and implemented. Both perspectives emerge from real concerns. Extremist violence continues to devastate communities across the Sahel. Villages have been destroyed, trade routes disrupted, and millions of people displaced from their homes. Governments across the region are under immense pressure to demonstrate that they can restore stability and protect their populations. Yet the future of the region may depend less on which alliance becomes stronger and more on whether cooperation can eventually replace competition. If ECOWAS and the Sahel Alliance find ways to coordinate intelligence, border security, and military operations, their combined capabilities could create a far more effective response to terrorism. Such cooperation would also reflect a deeper idea that has long shaped political thought across the continent. The concept of Pan-African solidarity suggests that African nations share common challenges and therefore benefit from working together rather than acting in isolation. In the context of today's security crisis, that principle may be more important than ever. Countries such as Burkina Faso are now central to this debate. Leaders like Captain Ibrahim Traore often speak about building an Africa new vision where security policies are guided by the priorities of African societies themselves. At the same time, institutions such as the African Union continue to promote regional coordination as a key element of stability. The challenge moving forward will be to balance sovereignty with cooperation. Strong national leadership can help mobilize resources and political will. But long-term stability in the Sahel will likely require collaboration that crosses borders and alliances. For the people living across the Sahel, the hope is simple. They want security, economic opportunity, and a future free from constant violence. Whether through ECOWAS, the Alliance of Sahel States, or broader African Union initiatives, the ultimate goal must remain the same. If the region can move toward genuine cooperation rooted in the spirit of Pan-Africanism, the current crisis could become an opportunity to build a stronger and more united Africa.